Hello, you are about to listen to another awesome episode of the If I Had One Wish podcast. It's such a pleasure to bring you these meaningful conversations from friends and allies across the Wish network. If you aren't part of the network already, do you know you can join? Either as an individual or a corporate member, you'll get access to all the wonderful things we offer here at Wish and play your part in championing women in our sector. Follow the link in the show notes to find out more, but for now, enjoy the conversation. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the If I Had One Wish podcast, the Women in Social Housing podcast, where we explore bold ideas and really powerful stories and ask that one wish question, which is, if you had one wish for the sector, what would it be and why? So I'm your host, Crystal Hicks, and I'm really pleased that in this series we are focusing on my presidential campaign, See Her. So we've got a fantastic guest today, Hannah Underwood. Hannah is founder of How We Might and vice chair of the Virgin Money Foundation. She's also a non-exec director at 13 Housing Group, and I'm so excited to get into the topic of my See Her campaign with Hannah today and really explore, I suppose, how do we take a gendered lens to decision making and how are we going to use data and AI smartly to reshape social housing for women, both who live in our homes and who work in our organisations. So it's so fantastic to have you here, Hannah. Hello.
Hi, Crystal.
Hi, thanks for joining us. Should we just dive into the questions? Because I think this first question's really important, which is, Hannah, who are you? So who are you? Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into social housing and data? What's that all about? I hear a bit of a data geek. So come on, dive in. Tell us about who you are.
Yeah. So, yes, I was a self-confessed data geek, but particularly around social impact. And so I'll give you a brief sort of career squiggle it's been, I guess. Originally I am a geek, so I also combined sciences at uni, and that was I'm interested in facts and information. But it was actually my first role outside of uni when I worked for a charity called Common Purpose, and that's where I first started to learn about the charity sector and the impact that it can create. In that case, for me, that was around working with young people, and I had an opportunity super early in my career to become CEO of a charity called The Key, a youth charity across the Northeast. And it was helping young people to build confidence and skills. And it was a perfect opportunity for me because the charity was in a complete mess. And my role just before that, I'd spent a year helping SMEs use data to improve the way that they ran their organisations. So The Key was a charity that needed that, but also had all the stuff that I loved about creating impact for young people. And I became a total nerd in terms of the way in which we use data within the charity very early on. And the data thread has sort of continued straight through to this day, but quite early on in that role at The Key, I helped to co-found another charity called DataKind UK. I was on their board for 10 years, only recently stepped down, and their role is about connecting qualified data professionals to charities who've got data and questions about their data, and seeing how we can sort of help to democratize access to insights from data for local community organizations.
Brilliant.
And from the housing side, so whilst I was at The Key, I started to become more aware of social housing, and I built a number of really important partnerships with social housing organisations across the Northeast. One with ISOS at the time, who are now Carbon. We boldly named it our Strategic Alliance, and I would meet with the senior team every few months. And what we were doing is we were looking at how we could empower and build skills for young people living in their homes and living in the communities that they were operating in. And I think there was maybe only one or two social housing providers across the region that we weren't working in partnership with. And it was a real shame when the sort of 1% rent cut came in, and we could see how the social housing organizations were having to deal with the financial trauma that was creating internally, but also that meant that a number of those partnerships ended up ending because that was kind of one of the first places that they were cutting costs. And that was, I felt and I still feel now, that that's a real shame, because the housing providers have got really unique opportunity to build partnerships with local community organisations to accelerate their own ambitions for their tenants. I then also spent 6 years as a NED of Living Homes, which is in Durham, and I came with all my data geekery, and that was, I think, part of the attraction for them. And it was a really great experience. I was helping them to sort of manage through their data transformation and their digital transformation programs that they had. But interestingly, the committees that I was on, I was the chair of the Finance and Investment Committee, which actually felt quite different to, I know, and audit. I was on audit and risk too. So it was like all the really cool stuff was where I was, even though, so probably more naturally my skills aligned with would have been with like the Housing and Communities Committee. But it was really interesting for me, like to have that sort of committee experience, because with me sort of like having more knowledge of the housing side, it felt like then I had like the whole like understanding across the piece for that organisation. And then once I left the Key, I spent a few years doing data strategy consultancy, mainly for corporate foundations and funders, a few charities too, and became aware that actually even the corporate foundations were really struggling in how their data was engineered. So they weren't able to make their data do what it is that they wanted to do. So we were creating these brilliant strategies, but then actually the implementation of them became really difficult because of their data infrastructure, essentially. So I went down that route to think about, well, how, what tools are out there to support charities in particular to get the right data infrastructure in place, and realised there was nothing that quite fit. And so my latest venture, How Might We Community, is helping to provide the technical tools to support charities to bring their data together, but then also augmenting that with access to data, professional data volunteers to help them to use the tools. So it's one thing, and this is a theme, that continues throughout organisations of all sizes, and I've seen it in housing providers too, is that, having the tools is one thing, but actually having the right culture and the motivations for people to use those tools in the most effective ways, that is quite a different challenge. And just being appointed to the board of 13, I had my induction last week. So I'm like very fresh, and we've got our like board development away day next week, so I'm really looking forward to sort of to getting back into the groove of things from a NED perspective.
Super. It's brilliant to have you, Hannah. I'll not ask you too much about 13 because you're very, very new, but I was in a taxi the other day with the Chief Executive Chair of Living on the way to the Housing Community Summit. We shared a taxi from the train station, and I said you were coming on the podcast, and they said, "Oh, brilliant, she's amazing. Got a brain the size of a planet." So I was like,
that was nice.
I was like, well, I'm so excited to have Hannah on to talk about all things data, because I think it is something that this housing sector is becoming obsessed with out of choice, or because they're feeling like they have to, with the regulator and ombudsman and the likes being much more focused on, do you really know your tenants, I suppose, and data is part of that, isn't it? It's part of that way of getting insight into who's living in our homes. Absolutely, and what's the condition of our homes and that type of thing. So we are becoming much more obsessed with data, and I think catching up in a way as well with, maybe other sectors who are further down that journey than we are. So we definitely need people like yourselves, who have that insight and that expertise to support the sector through this shift change really that we're experiencing. So for me, with my See Here campaign, I'm acutely aware of this obsession with data in the sector at the moment. And I read that book, Invisible Women. Have you read it? And you've not read it? No.
No, I haven't. No.
Send you a copy, Hannah.
Oh, that sounds great.
And that's all about, actually, the data that we have is completely biased towards men, and we don't capture data on women, and we don't look at our data through a woman's perspective. And that's where this sort of theme of encouraging the sector to take a gender lensed approach when they're looking at their data and seeing their data through that lens. What does this tell us about the experiences, the opinions, the needs of women as opposed to men? Like, how can we sort of put a different lens on this data and not just treat all our tenants the same? But when I've been talking about that sort of term, gendered lens, some people have looked at me as if I'm a bit mad. Like, what does that mean? So what does it mean to you in practice, putting a gendered lens approach on decision making, especially, I suppose, when we're thinking about our tenants and our colleagues in social housing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a term that I recognise and resonate with. And it's also, so for me, it's applying multiple lenses. So, thinking about tenants and customers of housing associations, there'll be what are the different ways and the intersectionality between some of the ways in which people will identify, and gender is one of those, but also thinking about ethnicity and disability. And these are all different lenses that you can apply to your data to help inform your decision making. And ultimately, it's about helping you to better understand the people that you're trying to serve, which means that then you can represent them better. And then it means that you can support them better. So, and I've been involved in a whole number of projects looking at these different types of demographic lenses and where they're applied, often after there's like an assumption that's been made. So if there's a sort of hypothesis that you may have about a reason why female tenants may be not being supported in the best way, then to go back and review and analyse that data with a gendered lens around that hypothesis can be a really effective way of doing it. And I could give you some examples, say, in the youth charity, The Key, that I used to run. So we were looking at, are there demographics of young people that we aren't reaching with our intervention? If so, who are they? And then what can we learn about, well, why are we not reaching them and why are we not supporting them? And one of those explorations revealed that although we had quite an even gender split between the young people accessing our programs, when you cut that also with an ethnicity lens, we realised that there were particular ethnic groups of young girls that weren't engaging. So it was like that double lens. And so in particular, there were Bangladeshi girls who we were just, we were looking, we were comparing to the numbers of young people in that group in the population. And then we were like, well, why is it that we're not reaching them? And we were able to look back again into our data to identify, well, where have we been successful? And in every single case, the youth worker, the facilitator, was also female and also Bangladeshi. So that meant that actually now we've got that information, we can now deploy our resources in a way that we were more likely to be successful. So we went out and tried to recruit more female Bangladeshi facilitators, and then ultimately we were able to reach that demographic. So I guess that's just, I know it's not a housing example, but it's like just showing how, where you're being curious and you're thinking first about the customer or the person that you're trying to serve, then just applying those different lenses in your data can reveal things that you probably wouldn't have come up with yourself. And then you would end up just having an underserved group.
Yeah. That word that you use there, being curious, comes up time and time again in the sector, when we talk about how do we best support our tenants and our colleagues, being curious about what is going on there, what is their experience, and sort of going deeper and further and really having that curiosity mindset, as opposed in the pursuit of understanding, wanting to understand better. Yeah.
I think curiosity is the core of all of this. When I work with organizations, I talk about how to build a curiosity culture within your organization. And if that can sit alongside, like if you're updating your data strategy and thinking, you might be thinking about governance or data integrations, and you'll be thinking about architecture and service design. If that is also put alongside trying to build this curiosity culture within your organization, then that's how you can start to get adoption of data from your workforce, particularly if you're starting with people on the front line, those ones who might be most removed from your data infrastructure. And actually, even just like the word data is just like, bleh. My parents' nickname for me when I was a child was Hannah Another Thing, because I asked so many questions and they were just like, will she just stop asking questions? So
my nickname for you now, I'm going to put that in my phone book. Hannah Another Thing.
But at that sort of like insatiable curiosity, if you can foster that, and part of fostering that is also, it's about the environment in which you provide for people. So psychological safety is a really integral part of that. So if you want to encourage your employees to start being curious and start asking questions like, are females represented in that insight? We've got these complaints data sets, we seem to be ticking all the boxes, we're meeting the minimum objectives, but is there a difference in terms of who's complaining between men and women? Are they complaining about different types of things? But if you've got, if it's allowed and encouraged for people to be curious and to question, then that's a really important first step that you can take to sort of encourage every individual in your organization to want to use data to help them be better at their jobs. And the other side of that is about then the infrastructure. So is it easy? Can they self-serve that curiosity? Can they go away and start, going down little rabbit holes themselves and come back and think, actually, I think I've got something here. I want to now raise this with my team, or take this a little bit further. So it's just putting little building blocks like that in place that can start to sort of foster this customer focused journey, and that can be underpinned and enabled by your data.
Yeah, I think there are definitely people within our organisations who deeply care about the tenants that they serve and about their colleagues and their teams, and who have that curious mindset. I think the sceptical side of me would say that, do we rest on our laurels when, we get our TSM results back and they're all right? Or we get our VC ratings, of 1 and 2 and whatever, and we think, oh, that's all right, we're doing all right, and so that's enough. Because I think that data, okay, I'm not a data geek, so it's coming from the non-data geek perspective, but I think that data can be potentially quite unhelpful, or it can be dangerous because it can lead to a complacence that there isn't a problem here. So you talked there about, be curious and think about, is this different for women? Is this different from people from different ethnic groups, or people who live with disabilities, or what have you? I don't think we always start from there, but I think what we do often start from is, we got 70% tenant satisfaction overall. And I think if you start from that point, you go in the wrong direction, because it's a satisfaction with a number without really wanting to be curious about what's behind that. So through my campaign, I've been doing a little bit of research and loads of freedom of information requests and things, as you can imagine. And some stats that have really stuck out to me is women are less satisfied with landlords than men. So in organisations where you're getting 70% satisfaction rating, women are typically way below that. So your male tenants might be over 70%.
Yeah.
Your female tenants are under 70%. So your average is coming out at the 70%, but actually you're massively underserving the women here. Now, if you just looked at the 70% on your scorecard, you'd be like, oh, jobs are good and 70% is brilliant. But when you look at it through that lens and you're like, hang on a second. If you just bothered to click the Power BI dashboard is all I'm asking for.
Yeah.
And it's like, what does this mean for women? And for me, if I was a chief exec of a housing organisation, I'd be like, hang on, people, why are our female tenants so less satisfied with us?
So I think there's sort of two different approaches to this. And the first you sort of alluded to at the beginning, saying, there's this sort of excitement now about data, and some of it's about being forced down that route from a regulatory perspective. And certainly the charity sector has been, the way in which charities collect data, it is broken in many senses, because they are collecting data to tell the stories that they think the funders want to hear.
Yep.
And so talk a lot about the sort of difference between what your motivation. So if your motivation was to understand and improve, actually you would go about things very differently than you would if you were just trying to prove, with little air quotes, and to tell the stories that you want to tell. And if you can sort of, from a leadership perspective, help emphasize the importance of actually what we're trying to do here is not just, tick a box from a regulatory perspective. What we want to do is to make sure we have happy customers and satisfied customers, and that is everybody. Then that would spark that curiosity. But the other focus, if you're already sort of too far down the rabbit hole with that one, is to then look at, okay, well, you're 72%. What do we need to do to get to 80%? Okay, well, then you need to go back down, drill down to say, well, is there a difference between different types of tenants and their levels of satisfaction? Oh, okay, well, look at this. Female tenants seem to be less satisfied. Okay, well, if we want to get our score up, then we need to design special solutions or design our services in a way that meet females' needs more than they currently are. So I guess there's sort of two ways that you can tackle that complacency.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some amazing organisations out there doing like brilliant things in this space. So it's not that there's a massive problem here that we need to fix. I suppose it is that culture of actually like, why are we doing this? Are we doing this because we want to be better and on that continuous cycle of improvement, or are we doing this to essentially be able to put out that annual report and say the regulator thinks we're brilliant and our financial ratings are brilliant, so investors come invest in us, but actually it's just a bit of gloss, isn't it? So I think, yeah, it's an interesting question. I do have a bit of concern that our emerging obsession with data, not just in the housing sector but overall, could potentially end up making the world a less equitable place for women than more equitable, because AI and our large language models and all of that are being built on this data. And if the data doesn't have women in it, then it's going to be designed for men and not for women. And, I've read loads about this in medicine and how medicine.
Oh, yes. I mean, that's really, that's a big one.
Yeah, but I think it's true in housing. Like, if you start to look at it, Hannah, I've learned so much in these types of conversations with people in different parts of the sector. Like, I didn't know that our design standards for homes were based on male data. So how high the handlebars are on the door handles are on your doors, and how high your kitchen shelves are, and ergonomically how your home is designed is all based on average male data. And that's just one example of many, that come up. And I suppose I'm just keen to understand what you think. Do you think actually the path that we're down, this obsession with data, is going to make it more equitable for women or less? Yeah, like what are the challenges, the barriers around this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could go either way, but I think there are opportunities to steer it in a direction that will make it more equitable for women. I think sitting back and doing nothing will take it in the direction that it would, that you're describing. And we, even, from a technical perspective, like looking under the hood at, okay, well, if you are, what are you using AI for within your organization? What data sets have been used to train that AI? And is that your own internal data? And if it is, then how representative is your internal data? And the other side is, I think in the world of even using ChatGPT for data analytics, like that's a thing, not in the desire to sort of be quick and get answers, is like, just because you get an answer, it doesn't mean it's the answer. So like making sure that we don't just take all of these shortcuts without like properly interrogating, well, where has that insight come from? What data has that been based on? How did that statistic actually be created? What's underneath it? And again, I guess that sort of boils back down to curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
But, if we are, even, the housing sector is massive. There's no reason why you couldn't collaborate to create your own large language models to build some of your own AI on that you knew was more representative of the tenants that you're serving. Like, that's absolutely a possibility. You don't need to be dependent upon existing models being pumped out by America.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds really innovative, doesn't it? Like thinking about how can we actually come together and prevent a problem or fix a problem ourselves. I think the housing sector sometimes forgets like how big we are as a collective.
It's huge. Yeah.
Huge. Yeah, definitely.
And even like huge in your own communities, like housing associations collectively are a massive infrastructure. But even at 13, on my induction last week, learnt that in Middlesbrough, 1 in 6 homes is a 13 home. I mean, that is massive. So, and then you've got communities like Gresham and like other places where, that percentage is even higher. So as a role that or social housing can play in those communities, like over and above the provision of housing, it's huge. And it's, you can be a convener, you can be like, have the ability to, flex your muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that sometimes that's underrepresented or like underutilized as a tool to get, more collaboration.
Yes.
In the communities in which you operate, even with other public sector providers.
Mm. Yeah. And I think that sort of boots on the ground community piece is so important in this whole conversation, isn't it? Because I think we'll often talk about data over here, and even where you put your data team within your organisation and then your housing and your communities teams over here, both of which are real sources of incredible insight. But if you don't bring them together, you're not going to have that full picture. I was just on a panel at the Housing Community Summit with some fantastic fellow panelists, and that was sort of the point they were making. People who'd had lived in social housing, who'd experienced like domestic abuse, been through all sorts, and their take on it was actually like, it's great to have this data, but if that data then doesn't lead you to really get into a community and speak to people and understand the lived personal experience, what is the point of that data?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see this as a growing nervousness more, widely in the community sector. Is data alone is not the answer to these problems, but what it can do is to shine a light on things that you should go and explore. It can identify areas where there's potential for innovation. It's not, and even like, I don't even use the words data-driven decision making, because I think that alludes to the fact that, well, you just do what the data tells you. No. It should be data-informed decision making. Like, data should be part of the process, but what it should do is say, okay, well, this is what the data is telling us. Is that actually people's lived experience? Is that really what's happening? And there's loads of examples where it's absolutely not, and for some reason the data's not been collected in the right way, or it's not been connected in the right way, and actually there's whole demographic groups that are then being unrepresented in those communities. And for me, a big part of that is about connecting different data sets together to allow you to get that sort of richness and that granular depth into local communities. So for example, I'd done quite a bit of work with Joseph Rowntree Foundation, a part of their Insight Infrastructure team. So they're looking at a whole range of different ways in which they could use data to help the charity sector, and Rowntree, obviously a housing provider.
Yes.
Too. So the project that I did was looking at open data sets. Well, they've actually government survey data, so you need to have a sort of license to access the data.
Yes.
But things like the English Housing Survey and Wealth and Assets Survey and Family Resources. And so these are all really, really interesting data sets that could be utilised effectively by the social housing sector and like smaller community organisations. But from what I discovered is that that's actually really not happening. So Joseph Rowntree, their concern, like the hypothesis that I was exploring was, are these data sets, are these surveys actually representative of the demographics of the people that the policies and the services are being designed on the back of? So and we were looking at gender, we were looking at ethnicity, we were looking at disability, and in many cases the answer is no. So and I talked with the producers of all of these surveys as well, and they were really aware of the fact that they weren't representative, and there was lots of weightings and all these sort of like statistical techniques that they would try to get around.
Yes.
But actually so that is a problem, and that needs to be addressed, but that's going to take like a long time. Like even different departments within ONS don't connect their data set. So like then but actually the problems were actually further upstream. So there's all this data that isn't being used by the sector. So either they're not aware of it, or they struggle in accessing it, or even then if they can access it, can they use it? So some of these survey data were like, 2,000 columns of data, and every column is like labeled with a code. Housing associations obviously bigger, you'll have your own data team, so there's more skills and capacity within there. But you think about even a regional charity like the one that I ran, we had one data guy 1 day a week, and I was way ahead of everyone else. I think that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, I think, in terms of the ability to connect these open data sets with internal data that housing associations have, but then also what is being held by those local community anchors, who are the ones that have those trusted relationships with your tenants and your residents, the ones that they will go to in times of need. Like, they have an understanding about their lived experience, and they have data that safely, securely, and ethically, and all of that sort of stuff. But there is a much bigger opportunity to generate more meaningful insights.
Absolutely. And I think, as you say, those anchor institutions, or even those anchor individuals who are in those communities, are like gold, aren't they, in terms of the insight that they can give you. I remember being in a meeting years ago, and the organisation I was working with had done this huge piece around their data and what we told them about their tenants and the insight and things, and they were presenting it back to the room of officers who were out in the communities, either repair operatives or housing officers and what have you. And they presented back this information, if it was going to be like illuminating, officers in the room were like, and like, yeah, we know, been telling it every day. Like, Deidre's furious with how long it takes us to do our repairs. And Mr. Smith, who lives at number 3, like, he hates our gas servicing processes that don't work for him. Like, it just came out in this whole meeting where they're like, we have been telling you this for such a long time.
Yeah.
That you've spent all this money bringing in this data company to tell you what, if you just had asked us, we already knew. So I think there is a bit of that culture thing, isn't it? It's around, who actually has the insight?
Yeah.
What is it you're trying to find out?
And also, what's the power when you connect? Because, in terms of impact, and especially in the way that community organisations, how they help people to understand the impact that they create, it's through telling stories, right? And it's all, you just told some there, and it was like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But when you're able to underpin impactful stories with data, that's where you can start to campaign for change, and you can start to give communities a voice and start to really create the right foundations for new services and to be designed and to be funded and resourced properly. Because just telling stories alone, as you say, they'll be saying, we've been telling you this for weeks, but until we believe it now, the data guys come in. But it's like the power when you pull those two things together.
Absolutely. It's a sweet
neither
spot,
of them on their own is the full answer.
No, absolutely not. And my hopes for you, Hannah, are really high. I'm hoping you're going to really be able to help us in the housing sector as we grapple with some of these big, meaty questions. I did want to talk to you a little bit about your new venture.
Yes.
How might we community?
Might we?
Yeah, how might we? It's got that sort of community, hyper-local focus, right? And I suppose my curiosity is around your vision for that, and specifically, what impact do you think it could have on improving the lives of young women and older women living in our communities?
Yeah, certainly. So I guess I've sort of touched a bit already on the different components that make up How Might We, but it's still very new, and it's still just me. So, I'm sort of trying to lead the charge. Yeah.
The we's and I at the moment.
Yeah.
Meet some friends.
But so ultimately what I'm trying to do is to disrupt the way in which the social sector is funded, because it's utterly broken from the way in which charities and the social sector organisations that require grant funding, like the whole grant funding side is completely broken. And I talked a little bit about that, the sort of the bias in the data. There's these sort of unhelpful power dynamics, and I could go on and on telling you about all of the reasons why that system is broken and it needs to change. But also from the other side, which actually a bit part of my wish is around the social value ecosystem as well. So there are millions and millions of pounds worth of social value investment that never reaches the front line. And when I was doing the sort of data consultancy work and realized actually there's these sort of like missing pieces, the tooling and the skills, but the community, how might be communities providing both of those things? But none of this will be achieved in isolation, not one organization, not one sector, actually. It needs to be a real collective, cross-sector collaborative effort. And everyone has got different perspectives, different data sets, different resources, different levels of influence to be able to put to bear on these situations. And so what I'm hoping to create is sort of like, how might we questions that then we can galvanize different players who are interested in, you know, the outcomes of those. We might have questions that are around increasing equity for women and girls in certain situations. It might be around addressing child poverty, for example, but having both a place-based and a thematic lens on trying to solve some of these really gnarly, tricky social problems, but with this cross-sector methodology. And so it's still early days, but I've got loads of interest and loads of people who've identified like what it is they've got that could contribute and what it is that they could get out of it. So yeah, it's exciting.
It sounds really exciting. Yeah. You hinted at your wish there.
Yes.
So I'll ask the famous question. So it's quite funny actually, when I've been out and about, people have now started coming up to me and going, Crystal, can I tell you what my wish is? It's like I feel like we need to create this sort of virtual.
And is it always really diverse?
Board.
Is it like, yeah?
Oh, really, really diverse. Yeah, definitely. I think we get some common themes.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need a national cross-party 10-year housing strategy comes up a lot. But yes, there's some real random ones. Like my wish is for an ice cream machine in the staff office. I've had that one before. So anyway, I digress. Hannah, if you had one wish for the housing sector, what would it be and why?
Yeah, so this comes from the fact that I kind of have a foot in two camps. So, and you know, from the social housing side, like at a governance level, but it's around this social value angle. So what I would wish is that housing associations are willing and able to use the weight that they've got around their social value sections in their contracts, and that's through construction, but actually through the whole supply chain. And in particular, thinking about this excitement about data is that there'll be lots of these data companies commissioned, there'll be lots of software being developed. So all of these will have the opportunity to put social value in meaningfully into those contracts. And if 1 or 2% of social value was spent on and actually reaching the front line community anchor organizations where your customers live, I just believe it could absolutely transform the lives of the tenants and your properties. And construction is like, for me, actually that would be the last one that I would go to, even though it's probably where the most money is spent, because it's almost like it's sewn up and everyone's patting themselves on the back that they're doing a great job, and it's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is so much more that could be done. Why are we asking private sector companies to understand complex social problems and know how to solve them? I mean, that's utterly bonkers. Like we know who knows how to solve these problems. We know who has the trusted relationships with your customers. And why do we not funnel those resources to those organizations and then measure the impact of it?
Amazing. Social value is a theme that is really emerging in the discussions that we're having. I've got Chef Joseph coming on in my Here Come the Boys series.
Okay.
He's head of social value, and I'm really excited to hear what he is going to say about that. And then Nicola Dibb, who is one of the founding members of Wish, is working really heavily in this space as well. And I think it is emerging as one of the key keys really to unlocking some of the equity and community challenges that we face as a sector, and as you say, harnessing that power that we have to channel that resource into where we know it will have the most impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hannah, you and I could talk for days, and we probably will. For now, I think we have to wrap it up, but I just want to say a massive thank you for coming on. It's been brilliant to hear from you. You definitely have the brain the size of our planet. So it's been lovely to just hear some of your reflections, and I wish you all the best with the new venture.
Thank you. It's been brilliant. Thanks very much, Crystal.
And to our wonderful listeners, you've been listening to the If I Had One Wish podcast. Do check out our other series, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts from. But for now, doodle pip. Thank you everyone for listening to the If I Had One Wish podcast. Next time, we'll be talking to another inspirational female from the housing sector who will be sharing her career story and what she's learned along the way. And of course, we'll be asking again the big question. If she had one wish, what would it be and why? See you next time.